This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics is now bringing you the second edition of Living Dignity. And Living Dignity has a central hub, its centerpiece, its beginning point, which is restoring respect for individual dignity. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics. I trust I'm also your voice of living dignity. If you have thoughts on this, please feel free to contact me, jeremy@respectonomics.com. And if this is a message that you would like to pass around, feel free to do so. We are all in the game. We're all in the pursuit of respecting individual dignity and restoring it. Now, I said that this was the hub, and like every hub, there's a spoke. And we have four spokes to the issue of living dignity. And the four spokes are enabling individuals to discover their own worth, reviving human identity, understanding the human triad. Triad means, in other words, the three parts of which every human being is: the body, the mind, and the spirit. And number four, honoring fairness. In this interview, we're going to be talking about enabling individuals to discover their own worth. Now, when we talk about discovering our own worth, we're really talking about understanding our own values. We can also talk about our self-worth, and some people will say there's a similarity or even a direct parallel between their own worth and their ego. Ego has a nasty way of being thought of as conceit and arrogance and selfishness, but I'm talking about ego here, where we have this sense of one's own worth and one's own value. The value is a very important word as well, because when we talk about wealth, true wealth is predicated on value. And when we find that wealth has been achieved or accrued without wealth, then we realize that there has been an abusive process, an abusive process, or it might even be considered parasitical. We want to come to the nub, to the guts of enabling individuals to discover their own worth. And the first thing we need to do is to examine our own behaviors. Now, our behavior is modified by a combination of upbringing and circumstances, our purpose in life, and so on. And we could talk about our behaviors endlessly. But what we want to do here is at least to think about some of the behaviors that we exhibit, that we activate in ourselves, and think of ways in which we can identify them. Then we can confront them, and then we may eliminate them. But let's talk about some of the problems that behaviorally that we exhibit. The classic is procrastination. There is issues such as ADHD, when we're starting on one task and zip around to do another. There's fear of rejection. There's fear of looking foolish. There's that situational shyness. I can do it under one set of circumstances, but not in another. I'll do it in one situation, but not in another. And we think in terms of fear of success, fear of failure. We've got all these fears that are built in and around us. Some of it could be considered part of our DNA. If it is part of our DNA, let's be intellectually honest. Once we recognize that it's a DNA issue, we can't attribute it to upbringing or environment or anything. It's just us. That is something that needs technical help. And technical help means, of course, working with a therapist who is specialized in these particular behavioral issues. But we're talking about more or less the things that we have learned and the things that we experience. And we normally think, when we go into the mirror and we say, what do I really look like? We can start recognizing some of these traits. So identifying them is one thing. One can identify procrastination, which seems to be the overriding one. We can talk about confronting them. And how you confront them is, of course, personal, but I'm going to give you a couple of clues about how you identify these issues and then confront them. The first part is the identification process, because what we need to do is think about the last 10 days, 20 days, and think about things that have been set aside that haven't been done. Now, it may not be procrastination, it may be avoidance for another reason, but literally just coming to grips with, I don't really want to do that. I know I should be, or I should have done it. Just identifying that alone is a healthy step. Healthier is when we write them down. And you literally write down, should have done this, should have done that. So that's one thing. And secondly, then we then deal with the confrontational. And confronting these behaviors is the biggest risk of all is, and I think we can all attest to this, is let's say that one procrastinates. So one of the things you're going to do is tidy your desk or your some workspace. The problem is we can take that issue of tidying up the desk, flexing our muscles, thinking, good, we've confronted the problem, we're dealing with it. Actually, we're dealing with the symptoms and not the problem itself. So when we identify these behaviors, it's not so much the symptoms that matter, they do, but you really want, and I need, to look at the problems that are underneath it. That there is a reason why I procrastinate. There is a reason why I keep an untidy desk. There is a reason why I avoid a conversation. Understanding those reasons is important. Those are the ones that need to be confronting, not so much the symptoms. And then, of course, we need to work on the principle of eliminating these behaviors. And we can think in terms of writing. Writing is a very powerful tool. It exercises parts of the brain that bring things almost magically, miraculously to the surface. I don't know if you've ever done this, but you write out a sentence or something, and then just, or even a word, and just start thinking about that word and writing down some things that connect to it. It's called mind mapping. It in and of itself is the most remarkable release of information, stuff that I wouldn't even know that I had myself. But here we are talking about these behaviors. We're talking about identifying, confronting, eliminating. That's not totally fair because the other thing is there are some things we do extremely well and people love us for it. It may be the way we communicate. It may be the way that we smile at somebody. It may be the way we talk. It may be the way we write. We can have all kinds of behaviors that we need to be very proud of and that we need to identify as well. So in understanding one's individual worth, yeah, getting the problems out of the way is a helpful part of the equation. But the other part of the equation is allowing ourselves to build up those issues which are truly worthy. They are truly ones that are the articles of dignity. It may be the way that you can go into a store and just have a lovely chat with somebody, maybe a customer or someone behind the counter. But whatever it is, think about the things you do well. And let's not think in terms of eliminating bad problems, which we need to do. The other side of the railway track is to build these wonderful behaviors that we are now recognizing. Now, when we do this, when we identify, confront, and either eliminate or build, we do that in ourselves. But as we do it within ourselves, we greatly improve our opportunity to reflect that same dignity into somebody else's life. When we feel comfortable in our own skin, that is when we are best able to assist other people. We're not doing it from a position of embarrassment or a place of wagging our fingers and all those nasty ways of doing it. No, we are literally that drawing alongside. We talked a moment ago about drawing alongside the good behaviors and the bad behaviors. We can draw alongside other people. It is one of the most powerful tools available, but we do it best when in fact we feel comfortable with ourselves, when our self-worth is in its right place, when we have that sense of dignity and identity. So this is building up in ourselves, becomes a mirror and an enabler for other people. But if it's true for other people, it is also true of organizations within which we operate. Your organization may be your place of work, it might be a community organization, it might be a faith organization, a service organization, but we can encounter the same or exhibit the same approaches that we deal with ourselves. I can go to my corporation, for example, and I can start studying and thinking about the things that are not being done very well. I can identify them, confront them, eliminate them. I may actually have authority to do that. But at the same time, the other railway track is to look at the behaviors of the corporation or the organization and ways in which I would like to build on those and, in fact, to restate them and to recover them. When we think in those terms, we create a far healthier place of work, a far safer place, actually, of collaboration and of community. It's worth the effort that if we can look at our own self-worth, we can then look at the worth and the value of the organizations and the people with whom we collaborate, either in work or maybe even in our own families. So, to summarize, individual worth is very, very valuable. It's probably the number one part of the living dignity quadrant. We are talking here about enabling individuals to discover their own worth. And we want to do the same to other people. Think about it for a second. If you recognize some strengths in yourself and let's say, some bad behaviors, but let's talk about the strengths here for a moment. You identify the strengths in yourself. Think of the accretive, the expansionary, the beauty of when we do the same for another individual and enable them to see their worth. When we go to a child, for example, and we say, you can do it. We do that, and a child will do something and then say, gosh, I can do that. And we can do the same with our fellow workers, our people in our families, to recommend that they look at the things they're good at and that we recommend them because we recognize them. So when we recognize the strengths in another human being, and when we talk about it and allow it to be expanded and to be increased, we are doing probably more service to another human being than one could ever even imagine. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift. Find your own self-worth and enable others to see their self-worth. Now, these are all very personal comments, individualistic comments. But I would like the corporations that are listening to this message to do the same thing, to come back to the employee, to come back to the staff, to come back to the board of directors, the individuals, to come back to the CEO, and start letting them know what their great values are and how they can be enabled and how they can be cherished and honored. Yes, there are obviously, I say obviously, I think it's true, that there are problems in every organization, and we tend to get hung up on those bad points. They need to be addressed, they need to be identified, no question. But what about turning the cube around and using one's own sense of self-worth to examine the worth of the corporation or the community in which one operates? It creates a different sense of relationship. It raises the bar. In actual fact, if we're going to talk about restoring respect for individual dignity, what greater process can there be than not only recognizing the dignity within oneself, the value within oneself, the worth of oneself, but also then imparting that to others, including the places where we work or the community in which we operate. That has got a chance of bringing together, not only bringing people together, but moving away from this issue of disunity and bringing ourselves to a place of unity. Unity is so powerful. And when we have that in ourselves, a unity of purpose, when we have a unity with others, and when we have a unity that is collaborative in the corporate sense, then we really, really do have some extraordinary opportunities ahead of us. There's one part to this puzzle, though, that hasn't really been addressed. And that is, if we're going to look at our values of self and so on, we're talking about activity. And every activity, as in a heartbeat, needs a rest. A heartbeat, as you know, goes beep, rest, beep, rest. And one of the issues that we find that in examining ourselves is when we are short of rest. It has been said that when we are tired, we become cowards. If we're going to therefore develop this sense of courage, this sense of being able to look at oneself and others with this filter of dignity, if we're going to do that, we need to be able to allow ourselves to rest. If we're going to look at our sense of ego, our sense of self-worth, it is important that we're not being frazzled and racing around the block, but rather to be able to sit down quietly for half an hour, whatever it would take, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times a week, and to examine the art of rest and to think about how do you rest. Rest is an activity. It's not a question of just sitting down and doing nothing. It is an activity that we need to address. It's an activity in which we need to be involved. And if we become restful, we then bring the frazzles in our life and the turmoil and so on. We start taming these wild demons. And when we can do that, then we clarify the picture, the frame of the things of which we are of great value, and of course in recognizing the value of others. So I normally say at this point, I rest my case. I can't think of a clearer definition, though, if I'm going to say the art of rest, to be able to say, I rest my case in the context of offering people the opportunity for rest, the opportunity to be able to take a place where they can look at themselves safely and quietly in their own moment of time. This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, your voice of Respectonomics, where our centerpiece here is living dignity, and the key behind it, the hub of it, is restoring respect for individual dignity. Thank you for listening.